everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Minecraft Disney World. This week we're going to be looking at quite an iconic ride, even if you're not a fan of Disney. You've heard of it, the famous Space Mountain, and here we are in the Magic Kingdom on tomorrow on the MC Magic server. We're going to go right through it, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history of Space Mountain. So let's hop in through here, through the queue area of Space Mountain. So Space Mountain was a ride opened in January of 1975, so it's a pretty old ride. In fact, it's considered the oldest operating roller coaster in the state of Florida. So it's the oldest, and it has a history that goes back a little bit further than that. In fact, Walt Disney himself sort of came out with the idea of what would become Space Mountain. Back in 1964, he wanted to build this roller coaster in Disneyland when they recreated Tomorrowland. But sort of refurbished it, and it was going to be an indoor ride. It's going to be called Space Voyage, and had John Hench, the very, very talented artist, work on this concept. And it's going to be an indoor roller coaster, very much like this with special effects and projections. But at this time, it just wasn't so in terms of technology, so it never really made it. It sort of shelved. Then it was only revisited back after the Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World was so popular, and so they sort of built it there in the one in the Magic Kingdom. Look, there's Tigger. It was the one that was first replaced. And even since they started putting space fountains in the other Disneys, so I'm sort of working through the queue here, the way queues laid out, and I would say that all of the rides here on MC Magic server, this one's probably the least true to the original. And I think the reason for that, and if you've seen my tour reel, it's because right now they're actually working on a 1-to-1 scale version of it. So while this might not be as accurate as some of the other rides, it's because they're working on more accurate versions. Go in through the Star Tunnel, and you have these windows to two different galaxies. And originally, for the most part of the ride's history, they were sort of still images that you walk through. But in about April, I want to say, of 2009, they shut down the ride for a pretty long renovation project. It was within the year. They hope they're back open. It cost them around $12 million. Part of what they did was they put in an interactive queue. So now where you go through, what you see here is a bunch of interactive games. And if you've been on Soarin', you kind of know what I'm talking about. They're just sort of there are a few there where you're using your body, but there's a lot when you're using controls, and they have all these space-related games, and there's sort of stuff like Disney threw in there as an attempt to keep you occupied while waiting on the long lines. So they also did a couple of other things with it. How do I talk about this without explaining? Alright, let's explain the ride a little bit. So it's an indoor roller coaster. It's a 300 feet diameter, and the roller coaster all in the dark with special effects. You can't really see anything here, and that's the point. It used to be set up so that when you walked into the queue here, you could look up and see the stars and see all of the special effects, and you could see the roller coaster going. And the problem with that was basically all the light from the queue area would bleed into the roller coaster and would sort of dampen the effects. Closed it off out of the ceiling. There's a lot more neon lights. It's sort of a retro futuristic vibe for the sci-fi. Let me put it out in the HUD here for a second so you can hop in and give it a ride. Oh, almost left without me. And so when you hop in this roller coaster, it's 1 seat per row, and it's like 3 rows per rocket ship, and you go through these wormholes, and it's going to launch me up. Hopefully to launch me up, you go in, and here's the roller coaster. So this is sort of Disney World's answer to having a Matterhorn known as a roller coaster in Disneyland. That's also very popular and very iconic. They decided it wouldn't fit with the Disney theme of Fantasyland and Walt Disney World. So rather than going with that, they decided to go with the roller coaster in Future World. And that's when they revisited this Space Voyage idea, and later became known as Space Mountain. Its 2 tracks are actually similar, all of 10 feet. One of them 10 feet longer, but they're more or less symmetrical tracks, so you could go on one or the other, and they would all weave within each other. And these little redstone torches are meant to represent the stars. And now they have projections of stars and planets. And it's just sort of a little fun roller coaster. Let's break that up there. Now the exit area, this isn't what it actually looks like in the real Disney World. Like most rides in Disney World, that ends up in a different area. And when you pick up, and it's actually got a really cool post-show queue area. It's not really a queue area, but it's got a post-show area, and it's originally the theme of the post-show area. And I guess this is what it's meant to represent, is you would be going up this ramp, which has escalator, and it would show you these different rooms. And for the years that the ride was sponsored by RCA, the post-shows focused around what life in the future would be like. And so there would be like different scenes of futuristic life. And then eventually, and I believe that was from 94 to 2004, it became about life. It became about shipping packages through space because the new sponsor was FedEx, and since 2004, actually hasn't been sponsored by anybody. Now Disney just owns it on its own, and they've just sort of various scenes. And I have nothing to show here for it because the scenes don't actually exist in here, but they throw a few references to a beloved old ride called Horizons. In fact, one of the tags on one of the pieces of luggage gets sent through the space and it's either a tag for a sticker, Mesa Verde, which is one of the 3 colonies that you can visit in Horizons, the old ride from Epcot. Probably talk about one episode, and you also see a robot in one of the scenes. That's the butler from Horizons, and it opens you out and you're in the sort of typical post-show area with, things you can buy, shirts, and it's a souvenir shop that's got like a few arcade games. And it's pretty fun, and one of those other really cool aspects about the ride is that it's not only a ride that you need to ride to see the ride, but that if you ride the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, also in Tomorrowland, you actually go into Space Mountain building, and you can actually see the track, and you can see people going around in Space Mountain. There's actually a point where the Space Mountain roller coaster carts cross paths with the Tomorrowland Transit Authority cart. So if you're really good with your timing, you can see, people, on the ride going up for this big plunge. So there you have it. It is very famous, the iconic, the unforgettable Space Mountain. I just want to point out that Space Mountain is my favorite ride, so I recommend you go on it when you're in Tomorrowland next. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Every week we're going to be taking a look at a new area or a ride at Walt Disney World, MC Magic Recreation, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you all next week. Bye!
La velocidad y no choque el auto delante del suyo. Caution, you're approaching the unloading area. Please slow down and do not strike the car ahead.